Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man for whom hyperspace inhibitor technology has become the center of his existence, and ultimately, his religion.
Tim Longo. I mean, it's not too far from the truth, to be honest. I do playing Homeworld, which is the game we are playing and speaking about. It does feel sometimes like a religious experience of some kind.
Like the pros and the cons. The monks who hit themselves on the back with whips.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
Mortification of the flesh. Well, before we get too deep into that particular wormhole, at the top of the show this time, I know some people don't listen to the letters. We wanted to talk about this week's coming charity stream event from the fans of the podcast called Defeating Games for Charity at defeatinggames.com. Tim, you were going to tell a little bit about the lineup and the plans and what it's about.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't want to speak for the organizers because Mark Garcia, Bio, Artemis, and Calamity Nolan, and many others have been working on this. But yeah, I think we just want to do a little bit of a plug here up top because it is coming up this weekend. If you're listening to this episode this week, the charity is for game preservation, and I'm going to rattle off some of this. Well, actually, all of the schedule here really quickly, just to give you an idea.
So first, which games are they defeating? There's some kind of theme.
Yeah, I was going to gloss over that, but I have my dark periods on Discord where I kind of miss some of the threads that are happening there. But apparently, because somebody got the wise idea to base the games that they're playing for the charity on the ones that I did not finish. Because
for the cast, right?
For the podcast, yeah. Because I apparently will never finish them. So I'd rather have the community finish them anyway. But no, maybe I'll go back, but no guarantees. So that's how they chose the list. So people just basically divvied it up and took the ones that they wanted to take. I'm going to do one as well. And so Saturday, January 27th is the first day. So that's this coming weekend if you're listening to this fairly live. And so on Saturday, we have Artemis, who's playing Final Fantasy IX. Lost Lake is playing Far Cry 2. Calamity Nolan's playing Devil May Cry. Kaon's playing Mega Man 2, Legend of Zelda, and Super Mario Brothers. He is a NES wizard. I watched his stream last night. Highly recommended. Kyle is playing Dark Souls 1 and 2. He's playing on Sunday. He's playing 2. Artemis on Sunday is playing more Final Fantasy 9. Baron is playing Grand Theft Auto 3 on Sunday. Mystery Dip is playing Rogue, and he has been playing Rogue for many months now, prepping in all sorts of ways, so highly recommend that one. I'm going to be playing XCOM, the original. Belmont's playing Mega Man X, and Calamity Nolan on Sunday is playing Resident Evil Village. And then there is a bonus unlock if we do reach the $2,000 goal. Can's going to play the original Metroid on NES. Nice. And I think there's some other fun things happening and some other unlocks. I might wear a Batman mask at some point. And I know that people have various lots of fun different soundboard stuff happening, and there's a whole lot of organization. So I really appreciate. I think we both appreciate everybody. But go to defeatinggames.com. It is a real website. It's a real good, amazingly built website, and it has everyone's Twitch links on it and a nice. Basically, clearinghouse where you can just go to that site, and the current stream that will be happening is streaming on that site via Twitch. So it's very slick. And of course, you can also donate on that website. And the goal again is $2,000. We're at $150. They are at $150 right now.
Nice.
Yeah. Good work, everybody. And thank you so much. It's
Yeah,
a
I'm looking
really
forward to seeing it. I'll probably pop in. Maybe we'll have to work out how to get me on and when I or call you or something.
oh yeah, that's a good idea. We should
Yeah.
coordinate that. Yeah, and Mark even did another logo, fancy logo for it, defeating games for charity, in the style of Final Fantasy. So it's very slick. So good work, everybody, on that.
Cool. All right. Well, let's move on then to Homeworld. I want to reveal up top. To be fair, I want to reveal a tip I got from a listener. An email we're not going to get to this week, but
I'm gonna be pissed, aren't I, that I don't know this?
probably. So apparently, let's see here. No, it's not this one. Now I can't remember. Oh, okay. Yeah, it is this one. So the strategy to get through the game is not to build up an army before you hyperspace to the next mission, because difficulty is increased the more units you bring along from mission to mission.
So that's very consistent then. So if you
and that's exactly the thing that I was worried about. I referenced Julian Gollop a couple weeks ago about how I'm worried they might have thrown in some
memory.
The way it worked in XCOM was the better you did,
because I'm about to play it.
It became a multiplier on the difficulty moving forward and the units you'd face in particular. I think the unit set. So if you kept always surviving, which of course, like, there's something about me that's obsessive about that. Like, I gotta keep all the guys, right? You're better off losing a few because the game will think, well, they're not very good at this game or whatever. And, the games don't think, but the algorithm basically works out that you'll get easier things to fight. I believe more or less, or fewer of them or whatever it is, when you go to your next encounter. So you kind of always want to be losing a bit. Not a ton, but a bit. And in Homeworld, of course, if you're like not keeping all the ships you've built, but having them retire, so you get the resource units, you also have more resource units going into the next mission. I accidentally scuttled the whole fleet at one point too, which is like not what you want. Yeah, well, no, I did it thinking thinking it was the same thing. I didn't look at all the buttons. I did it, and I was like, oh, this is the one I want. I'll just scuttle all these, and then the resources didn't change. I was like, oh no, I've done something horrible. And that actually ended up making it easier for me because I went back to 7, I was telling Tim pre-show, and getting through 7 and 8 were not nearly as bad this time around, knowing that. So basically coming from 7 into 8. And then 9 and 10, even knowing that, were just brutal. Just hours. Hours of play. Many hours. I think I spent, the save games don't actually save how much you had played. So whenever you load a save, you're starting from 0.
Yeah.
And I'd be finishing these missions and I'd look at the clock and it'd say 8 minutes and 40 seconds. And I'd say, that's not right. It's been 8 minutes and 40 seconds since I loaded a save for the 4th time, trying something slightly different from that save. I must have had 8 saves, 10 saves I was working from in mission 10. And then 11 and 12 were like, bang, bang, did them, no problems. 11.
Good.
11. No, I think it was 12. 12 was a little tricky that I had to restart it quite a number of times, and because build order ended up being super important. I had the right general strategy, but like what units I got out there fast was really important. And how I used what few ships I did have. So anyway, that was the big tip, and it made a huge difference in my life this week.
So you basically employed at the end of each mission, you were decommissioning your ships.
All of them, yeah, except for the resource collectors. Oh, and the capital ships, because I found at least in mission 10, this was fun to discover after I had beaten it, that if I tried to retire a fleet with capital ships in it, the game would just crash. It would just, as soon as I issued the command, it would just crash, black screen.
Wow.
And I couldn't even alt tab. I ended up powering down my laptop. The next time I actually ended up hitting the enter key, and it turns out there was just a dialog box, but because it was blocking messages or something, I don't know what was going on. Anyway, so yeah, it was way easier once I finally got through 10, which itself, like I said, I probably spent 3 or 4 hours on mission 10 alone.
Yeah, I think I had probably three plus hours on both as well. I'm not done with 10. I'm at the very end of 10, but probably 4 hours on 10. And then 9, I really had a hard time with that last section, that last sort of bit with that alien ship, which, we can talk about later. But yeah, okay, so... and I think too, we talked about this last time, I think, but there's 2 things that the remaster is doing that it's definitely quality of life stuff. We mentioned one obvious one last time of quick docking at the end before you hyperspace.
Yeah, I think that was new. It felt new anyway.
It seemed, because I just remember waiting for everybody to dock at the end too, and that kind of being a big deal and a bit of a part of the pacing and flow of a mission. And then the other one that I really don't think was the case before was I don't know if it's any, but there's a good number of resources. If you have not mined them at the end of the mission and you just hit hyperspace, I've had multiple times where I will get quite a bit of resources at the beginning of the next match, not decommissioning, but just free. And it feels like the amount roughly that I would have gotten if I had just
you could have
everything.
Spent the time mining. Yeah, I noticed
anything
that's
out there.
Yeah, I had some where I noticed like that my resources went up quite a lot. I don't know if that's it also felt to me like it was, similar to what you could have collected, but or harvested or whatever. But it was not. Also, one time it felt like it was like a really precise number, like it was a multiple of 1,000, and felt really weird.
Yeah, maybe they're
some
just
random number. So they might also just be like, this mission plays better if you have this much stuff.
I could be misremembering. Maybe the original did that too, but
I have no idea, and I'm not going to investigate. The remaster is pretty bare bones, so I don't know. There weren't even the manuals, as I pointed out last week. So,
it's just so, I don't know. It's a bummer to hear about that difficulty approach because, and it kind of relates to one of my points about 9 and 10 this week, is the resource management and the decommissioning. I keep using that word. I don't think it's the word they use.
Retire.
They're retiring. There were points when I'm really micromanaging my retiring of craft to get a different craft, basically. Like I'll retire something that I don't need to get another one because I just don't have the time to go out and find or wait for the resources I need. And so I was doing a lot of that sort of trade-off stuff. And I kind of, even though it is definitely a pain in the butt, I do the resource management and not zero sum, but the finite number I like about the game because it does feel different from other RTSs in that way. Very, very seldom does a game like StarCraft deal with that kind of finite amount. You can definitely expend the resources on a map, but usually they just give you way more than you need to win. But here it's just very much like a balancing act. And okay, I have 1,000 resource units. What can I use those for? Right. And because of the rock, paper, scissors of the game, there's times when I'm like, oh, I have way too many of these. I need these. And so I can actually just trade these off for those. It's time, of course, to build them. But so I just think that's really interesting. But then I don't know, the now that we know that strategy, which of course I'm going to use, the whole point of building a fleet over many, many missions in this sort of like meta arc, right? This persistent meta arc is so interesting and so different. And I love it conceptually so much. But if it just gets more and more punishing, it's just not fair. It doesn't feel fair.
Yeah, it doesn't at all. And the other thing too is that one of the things, and this kind of, thinking about it a little bit more makes it make sense, is that you might need totally different ships when you arrive at the next mission.
You totally do. Yeah, the strategies totally so far have been so different.
So as a game, they're pushing you to do this one thing, which is like, kill all these, just retire all these ships because you're not going to need to know what you need. So you want the resource units instead, is kind of what they're saying.
Well, but I also assess,
from a game standpoint.
Yeah. Well, but I do that now. I mean, I don't, without the difficulty element of it, in one of the first things, I mean.
Well, the other thing though I was going to say is that if you knew that, you could pre-build it. So you'd be like going forward in the game, learning like, oh, I'm going to need 1 million, whatever, repair, salvage corvettes or something,
You mean because you know the mission so well?
Well, because you finished 8 and are going to 9, and you're like, oh, I'm going to need this particular type of ship. So then you reload at the end of 8, right? And you trash all the things you don't need. You build all the things you do need, and now that's your fleet. And you go into the next mission with the fleet you need already, which seems like not something they'd want either.
Yeah. But then also, if you have a fleet, it's going to be more difficult anyway.
Yeah, well, that's a separate. Yeah.
It's just weird. It's the usual. I mean, we've talked about it, dynamic difficulty or difficulty in any version so many times over the years. It's that slippery slope and fine line and all that stuff of how clever do you try to be behind the scenes without telling the player what's going on. Whether they figure it out or not is one thing, but we talked about it with Deus Ex, I think, and you probably brought up the simplicity of their difficulty as one example.
Right.
That a lot of games do that, but it's just like at some point it's like just don't be too clever with this whole problem. Like don't overthink it, I guess.
It's a very hard thing to test and balance as well, right? Because the people who are making those judgments know the game too well, know the game way better than, anybody who's going to be buying it is going to know for a while. There is an implicit, like, save the stuff you got and maybe even build more stuff kind of easy reading of the game, right? It's like easy to that, it like makes sense to me that I would like want to keep my army together and take them to the next battle. But the game is not built that way. The game is counter to that.
Spiritually, and I mean like tonally that's what they're trying to promote.
Exactly. No, I know, right? Yeah, I mean that's the real tension between those two things.
Yeah.
And also what a naive player would think. Right. Yeah. And naive. I mean, I had to be emailed about it, so I was still a naive player. 8 missions in or whatever I was. So yeah, I think that the interplay of that sort of like bunch of stuff which makes sense of like, oh yeah, I want to keep stuff. I built it already. I don't get as much back for it. Whatever. Probably. I don't even know. Versus just. I'm gonna be totally ruthless to duck the difficulty is a very counterintuitive.
Makes kind of too much kind of thing. I mean, if the balancing of it is okay, then I guess there's a world where if you are escalating and they're escalating with you, and you generally know how to play the game well, you may not notice.
The number of ships you have, though, is not an indicator of your skill at the game. It's an indicator of your patience to mine a bunch of resources, endlessly, and build up a fleet before you depart. So they're, the real judge of a
That's
I don't even know. I was going to say the real judge of the expertise of the players, how few ships they had when they accomplished the last objective. But then I'm like, that's not necessarily true either, because a really expert player might be able to feed it with fewer. It's difficulty.
That's what I mean. There's a rabbit
really
hole
tough.
here where there's really, I mean, I think one of the true answers is really more playtesting than it is about trying to programmatically figure it out, ways to do it in a tricky way. It's more of just, like you said, the developers will be too close to it, but from a balancing perspective, taking the dynamic difficulty thing they're doing out entirely, it just is about, getting a lot of data points on people who are playing the game at different skill levels, and then balancing. And that's how I would say Blizzard is doing it. I'm pretty confident, right? It's just about playtesting and fine tuning the resources that are found on the map. I mean, the bummer, again, going back to my previous point, the bummer about all of it for me is when I get to, I think one of the things that I learned the hard way over my StarCraft years is that, in an RTS, information is the most important thing. And so probes or whatever probe type unit you have is key, or sending out a Zergling or whatever it is. You want to know what's going on out there. And so that's important in this game too. And so I actually like early game sending probes out to see what the situation is. And then I do, like I said, retire some ships and build some new ships and kind of micromanage that stuff. But now it's like it doesn't really matter, sort of, because I'm still going to send probes out, but I'm going to come in with a clean slate, and then I'll just build what I need to, So it's that sense. It's so funny because it's like antithetical to the whole name of the game, the whole point,
I know.
We're building this whole thing and look at us getting there together kind of stuff. But I guess hypothetically, if you story it through, it's like, well, the people aren't going away. They're retiring the ship, they're going back into the mothership, and then they're going to do something else.
Yeah, but there's just something about, like, I decommissioned the ship. I mean, if it's 1-for-1, I guess you can sort of squint your eyes and say, but if you lose anything on decommissioning versus what it costs to build it, then it doesn't make sense narratively that they would do that, because, they're losing something. They're losing a finite thing that they have. Well, I guess it's not really finite. I don't know. It's tricky to justify, in my opinions. So you had made a point in pre-show about sort of your RTS expectations and how they were kind of maybe getting in the way. I mean, for me, the game was frustratingly difficult up through mission 10, at least from mission 5. So I can definitely see why I put this game down back in the day. It just got to a point where, but I probably was hitting the dynamic difficulty system. So maybe I could have worked it. But anyway, how are your expectations kind of going counter to this game's ethos?
Well, I think I guess it's various, a couple different things. The way I'll start though is in I guess what I'll call it, our traditional RTS, or the ones that I'm most used to, and again, StarCraft being my favorite example. There's a certain amount of slop, I guess I'll say, where in the Venn diagram of the rock, paper, scissors of it all and the plate spinning of it all, there's wiggle room in failure. There's wiggle room in what counters what. You can brute force sometimes if you want to, if you just want to do it that way. It's sort of like there's a lot more. It's not that it's overly forgiving, but there's a lot more options on how you can tackle things. And I feel like I'm playing this game the way I want to play it, but I don't think that's the way it should be played. I think that there are certain rock, paper, scissors and certain even potentially like formations or approaches to a battle that you should take over others. And then the second thing combined on top of that for me is I've come in with some weird, I don't know from where, expectation about how many units I think I need for a certain task to do a thing.
Yeah.
And I think I'm almost always underestimating that.
By
and
far.
by far, and they just get
Yeah.
taken out really quickly.
Yeah.
Or I'm taking a knife to a gunfight or something. So I'm just coming about it the wrong way.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'll echo that. It's more that my expectation is, yeah, I definitely have that numerical expectation that I'm always wrong with. So that's a thing. But one of the ways this game plays that I didn't expect a lot of because of the expectations you had, are very similar, I guess, to mine. Typically the way I would play another RTS would be very reactive. I kind of get some information. I might have a general strategy that I've just been using and has been working, but I am basically going to wait and find out and react to it and try to deal with that. Try to have a balanced approach until I know more, and then etc. In this game, it feels almost like a puzzle.
Yeah, failure. It's like it's a save scumming game.
Yeah,
I think it's
exactly.
puzzle. I wrote down puzzle as well for Mission 9 especially,
Yep.
And it's very much like, oh, okay, that didn't work, because you can't fail really.
Right.
If you fail, you might as well just start over.
Yeah, exactly.
It's hard to recover.
Yeah. It's very hard to recover. I did have one mission where I did recover, and it was kind of thrilling. It was mission 5, and it was pretty thrilling as a result. But it was only because I had thrown in the towel, that I was like, well, I think I even made I made a note, like, I think this mission is done, but let me play it out. And I managed to come back and I was like, oh, that was really cool. So that's is a cool feeling to have. It's almost never the feeling I have. It's been that one mission. It's always that I'm getting to the end and going, well, I just wasted that 30 minutes of waiting to get all these ships across the map or whatever. It's very strange because I find myself being like, okay, well, I know that I need to get that carrier all the way over to there. So let me just get that going. And then I'm just going to, go in the other room and make a sandwich and come back when that is finally finished. Because that is, because it's not like the enemy, if the enemy is unaware of you, and in fact, in that research station scenario, mission 10, if the enemy is unaware of you or you haven't damaged them, they're kind of inactive.
Which is not
time.
Yeah, which is not a very common RTS approach. It's more of like a space sim TIE fighter kind of approach, but as far as scripting goes, but it does feel all scripted with those triggers, but typically they just would keep sending stuff at you to keep you on your toes. But
I think it's your stance versus I think it's your stance versus their stance, and you're both like in defensive mode, so nobody attacks anybody. I think it probably boils down to that. That's kind of the logic of how those things happen. So I was able, but it took me a lot of experimentation to find that, and every time I experimented, I was like going back 5 minutes or more of play. And there was one time where I did this whole strategy, and at the end, the strategy just didn't work at all. And I had very few resources left. So I was like, okay, I'm going back to the beginning, and like a whole hour was gone because I spent that hour learning how to unlock the particular puzzle of this one, and 10 was the worst at that. I probably spent 4 hours on mission 10, and it was like at each stage of it, I'd get it wrong once or twice, and I finally figure out this is how I get through this part of it, because there's basically this long trail you're going up multiple things. One of those took forever to figure out how to attack it, and then beyond that, the next thing took, and all the distances were so far, and I was trying to move such big ships, it just took forever. So there was a lot of time. Anyway, I'm rambling about the experience, but that has been a really weird pacing for this game, which I think also is counter to my expectations, and it works with the puzzle thing in a kind of frustrating way.
It's. I think the summary point for me on my RTS expectations coming in, which is pros and cons, I guess, to that, is that there are times when I really appreciate the game and really really like the game because it's so different, And there's just, if I kind of just calm down my frustration for a moment and just kind of take a, sit back and just observe what's happening in the game, it's very impressive and so like fresh and unique and different from anything else out there. But then there's just that sort of like same frustration with, I don't feel, and maybe it's just, it's with these games, I think we probably talked about it with Civ as well to some degree, is there's usually that hump you get over where all the stars align and you kind of grok the game enough to where you're kind of not on autopilot, but it becomes a little more routine. And that's how I feel about StarCraft. Eventually you get there too. And I just don't think I've gotten there with this game. I'm still going up a steep hill with just understanding almost like the persona of the game, or like the brass tacks of how to approach it. Yeah. And I'm just kind of barely squeaking through each mission. I was like, okay, whew, I did it. I'm not sure how, but I did it. I just kind of, it's trial and error right now versus skill. And I'm sure because I really don't think I finished this game back in the day, but I did play multiplayer some, and I don't remember getting over this hump back then, but maybe I did. But I'm sure that's out there someplace where just kind of everything you coalesces, you focus in, and you're like, okay, I kind of know enough about the game to understand how to approach any given problem that they throw at me.
Right.
So
yeah, I mean, I think that I may have, overcome that hump, because with 11 and 12 went really pretty smoothly, even though I had to sort of restart them multiple times. It was because, I didn't have this information when I started. And once I knew that, then I could just plan for it, right? So I could just be ready that was going to be a thing. I need tons of this kind of ship immediately, and I need to just keep pumping them out and whatever. And but I also need to make sure I make some of these. And I know that because I failed 6 times because I didn't have enough of those or whatever, so it was just it's just a weird thing that I understand. I think the strategies pretty well, and how to counter everything, but I can't plan for that the first time I play a mission, because I have no idea what's out there.
Yeah.
So I can't plan. Having had some build order for phase 1 of the battle, I can't meaningfully have planned for phase 2 until I go out and find what phase 2 is going to end up being, which was the case with with mission 10, where it's like, you get this far out and you run into these kinds of ships. Then you get this far out and you run into these kinds of ships. And there's a minefield. And then your target is nearby and, they have these kinds of ships. And it's like every step of that is a huge amount of time invested to react to. And I lost a lot of time just learning that and having to go back to the point at which it would have been useful to know that information. So my play of this is like a Sidewinder track. I'm just like going back and forward and back and forward and back and forward, trying to accomplish the missions. Which, honestly, in 1999 or whatever, I don't think is necessarily damning. It's more frustrating for me today. It's not the sort of thing I tend to enjoy. So
yeah, it feels like you're wasting time, or it's not wasting time, but it feels like there should be not necessarily encouraging it per se, but I do suggest using probes and things, because you can send a bunch of those out quickly and get a bunch of information. And
the thing is, I have a hard time targeting them. So maybe we should talk about the 3D positioning as the next topic, because, I was doing some probes at the beginning, especially if it'd be like, there's anomalies here or whatever. And I'd try to land a probe there, and
they wouldn't hit.
It wouldn't hit near enough that I'd learn anything. So now I've just literally burnt 70 RUs, for nothing, and the time that it took to do it, which is, granted, not much time. It's the cheapest unit in the game, but there's just that, like, okay, if it's far away, I need to go out to that 3D globe map, and then I need to try to precisely put it near that thing. And because some of the elements are 2D and some of the elements are 3D, it's extremely difficult for me to do that. Even seeing that I'm landing in the position, it doesn't look right most of the time. Like, am I going to be near it? And then I won't be there. And and then I'm frustrated. I'm like, okay, so I did that, and now that probe is dead, right? The probes you can't move a second time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, if I could, like the Eye of Kilrog, just kind of fly it around myself, I'd feel much better about doing that. So it's in theory possible, but in practice, that control mechanism is really weird. I know you've had a little frustration with it as well.
It's mainly the elevation that you're talking about there, the elevation aspect of it. For me, when I'm doing, the shift key to change the elevation, I think I was trying to think of another sort of third-person camera analogy that we've talked about on the podcast. It could be sort of like the difference between Tomb Raider exploring third-person camera and then Mario
64,
right? And sort of like the leap forward. And I feel like they're trailblazing with this game, but they didn't quite get there. And I think one suspicion I have, and using the probe as an example, especially with the sensor map, the big sort of macro map thing, I think they needed to, I feel like I often want more automated or like sticky targeting for things.
Yeah.
Very discreet about when you click, they're assuming that click is where you want it to be. Yeah. And they're putting all of the onus onto the player to be good at that. And it's just really hard to deal with elevation. So in 10 was a mission where they intentionally stress test this with you because
exactly.
You have to stay in a certain debris field or whatever. And so I was using waypoints, which is like very much a claw situation because you're like holding shift and you're clicking, and then I remap a bunch of my buttons. So for me, it's a T. I'm hitting T, and then and then I have to hit click left click, and then right, and you're just doing all these things. And it's like, eventually it'll become second nature, like anything like on the mouse and keyboard, but it's not right now. And so it's very cumbersome. And sometimes like you were saying with the probe, I'm clicking, I think I'm clicking in a certain place, but the way that the perspective is working, it's actually across the universe. And it was like, oh, well, they just left and went, no, I'm not getting them back.
Yep. They're on vacation.
So it is frustrating. They're just not, it's just not there. Again, I think it's like a huge leap forward, but I think like to your point about something like the anomaly, it's like, well, go to that map, click on the anomaly, and then just have the probe go there. Why make the player have to manually do every single thing?
The assumption if you're supposed to be in this sort of tube, basically is what this mission 10 we keep talking about. Yeah. If you're supposed to be in that tube, then when you mouse around for where to go, it should go in the tube. It's right in the middle, right in the center of the tube is the path I want to take. Because
it's like
told me that's the safe space. So why would I go anywhere else?
It's sticky targeting. It's almost like, another weird analogy I'll bring up is controller-based 2D or controller-based 2-stick FPS targeting for Halo or something, right? Where it's like there's a lot of math and design and tuning going into how your crosshairs are going to be sticky. You don't notice it, but there's stuff going on there, both in the curve, the aiming curve, as well as how sticky the target is. And you play a game like GoldenEye versus Halo, and you see a huge difference. And it's trying to help the player with the intention that they have, versus on a mouse where it's very discrete. Like I just point where I want to point. So it's like, it's just a little bit more help basically and intention. it's a very hardcore PC game as it is. It's like, nope, you're the player, you have full control, you can do whatever you want, and it's all on your shoulders. It's like, well, yeah, but I'm trying to have fun as well, and I don't want to lose a probe by an errant click that just went out into the middle of the universe, So give me some help here, kind of stuff.
I mean, I understand why they wanted to make it 3D. I mean, this was a
it's a great choice. Yeah,
but it's also, I mean, I think I would have still enjoyed seeing the spaceships have their battles in 3D, even if all the objectives were on the same plane. So I don't think there's, it also one of the things about, kind of reinforces this is in the mission where you're first can't move, you drop out of hyperspace, can't leave. The one with the timer is there's one of those things that appears kind of behind and to the right of the ship in the orientation of the Homeworld ship, the mothership. And it is such an awkward position to think of looking at something. I'm looking through myself, the center of my fleet, up and behind, and it's just feels uncomfortable to do, even though it's, fully, like, it's just mentally, it's not the view I'm used to of having at this ship, and so it just feels strange. Like, I shouldn't be looking this way to control what I'm doing, is the other thing I have happened, and so it's just there's something weird about that.
I think there's a reason, I think, with a lot of, again, I applaud them for doing it, and I think it does make the game so much more unique and, again, trailblazing, because they did choose to go after full 3D in this context. But I think that, there's a reason that most of the space flight sim games out there generally have at least a band of a plane. It's like you're in space, but generally things are happening on a wide band of a plane. Yeah. Especially the Star Wars based ones, because it's so World War II kind of focused as an aesthetic. And you still can fly straight up and straight down, if you want to occasionally, but like generally, like you said, the mission design has a focal point that I think just human brains have a better time dealing with. Yeah. But yeah, again, I don't think I played 2. Pretty confident I didn't. And I don't think I finished this one back in the day. 3 is coming out. I'm really interested to see what modern like quality of life and helpers, they might use in a brand new version of this game. Yeah. That might actually make it a little bit more user friendly, usable.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, this is definitely the sort of thing where you feel like the person who starts working on it, if they get to keep working on it, they're going to ultimately find the solution. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I think, one of the differences, since you mentioned Mario 64, we tend to have our failures in public. And I think, at Nintendo, they just keep banging on it till they figure it out. And then they just don't. Those are all just prototypes. It's all prototypes until you figure out how this is going to work. So when they have a leap forward like the Mario 64 camera, it's because they failed at it 20 times. And, that's in, that's kind of in opposition to this approach, which is more like, what, we're going to go for it. We're going to, fully 3D, and we're going to figure out how to do that. And they don't quite get there. But others can then build on that. And so it's easier for the state of the art to move forward, Yeah. So, do you want to talk at all about the story, or like how you've been using new units and things like that as they've come along? What have you kind of learned about the rock, paper, scissors of it all that have been informing your play?
I wish I could tell you. I just don't, other than reading the descriptions of the units and like what they're good against and weak against, and I think I'm employing that generally, but again, I think I'm bringing too few or something to the party, because there's certain times when a whole squadron will just be wiped out and I'm not really sure what happened. Right. So I feel like I brought them I'm not doing a lot of micromanagement, to be honest, and I am starting to use formations more, but that only goes so far, I think, once the chaos starts happening.
Yeah.
And I think importance of things like support frigates or having, I don't know how automated they are when it comes, if you have a carrier nearby, if fighters will go back to recharge or not. So I guess that's something you could try to do too, to lose fewer fighters. But yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's a little bit of analysis paralysis for me right now, because there's so many units you could do.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's a lot of different strategies, and I think they're trying, we're mid-game. I'm mid-game right now, and so they're still in a traditional mission design flow. They're still teaching you fundamental concepts, I think.
Yeah.
And so, to kind of prep you for the final tests in the last few missions. And I still think I'm not, fully digesting all of it. But on the lore and stuff, I was only making a quick comment on that I think in 9 or 10, they start talking about technology as a religion. Yeah. And the alien, it's very Halo in that way. And I guess, Halo came out after, vice versa, or what have you. But there's just a lot of lore that I love, and I probably should go and read that book that you mentioned, the manual that's all about the lore. But I definitely cannot figure out what's going on. Who's who? I mean, I know who the bad folks are, but I don't. Other than that, I feel like there's multiple aliens, and then there's that whole thing with the nebula where they stayed in there, and then they were in there so long that it became their religion. Technology became their religion or something. It's just a bunch of. It sounds really cool, and I'm really intrigued by it, and I want to love it, but it's so few and far between, right? It's hard to really.
Yeah, it's something that I don't tend to like too much of that in my science fiction, but like the degree to which you enjoy it there's such a wide spectrum of possible solutions there that it's hard to pick I guess you just pick your lane. You're like, this is what I'm doing, because for me, I'm not really like after 12, I watched the video, I guess. I wanted to make sure I got an autosave, I guess, when the next one started. So they start describing what's happening. I'm like, that doesn't make sense. Why would they do that? Why is this happening?
It's a little disjointed.
It just doesn't totally parse for me, I guess, that there's, I mean, you'll get to it. So I won't go into it, but maybe we talk about it next week. Just a moment where I'm like, I'm not sure why this would be it, but maybe they explain it and I just kind of glossing over. It's very possible. It's not exactly my cup of tea. There's something about this and some very well regarded books that I won't name that I'm like, there's this mix of the name, whatever the consonant soup of things that you need to know, names and concepts or whatever, that are made up for this book that you're going to read once. Kind of all that naming stuff.
It's a lot of proper nouns that are all thrown together. And again, that was one of the challenges with Halo 2. There's so much of that. It's hard for people to keep track of it, but oftentimes there aren't characters to graft it onto, because that's how people remember stuff is meaningful and memorable characters,
right,
that are associated. But with a space game like this, where it's all ships and stuff, like, other than the voice actors for the Fleet Command and the trader ship,
the Bentusi,
which I can't even remember their name. The
Bentusi,
those are memorable, and I have some affinity for them. And I kind of like, there's at the end of 9, the Bentusi come in and they're kind of like, oh, you just found this really special thing from the alien ship, and we'll trade with you. And then they're like, well, we'll take back. And then we say, our Fleet Command says, can you help us? And they're like, well, we'll go back to the Galactic Empire and ask them to take it under, advisement. And so it's like, there's some broader, bigger thing out there. So that's cool because it adds mystery. But like, yeah, it's just hard to keep track of.
Yeah, it's a little messy. Yeah, no, I just find myself kind of also, when those things happen and then I see them a couple of times, but now I've seen them sort of in a different order because I got past a point and then had to go all the way back. Like,
oh yeah.
Right. So it's like it gets even mushier just because I'm hearing it multiple times, but in different orders sometimes. And it's so everything starts to, it's hard to follow the thread through the whole thing. Yeah. Okay. I think we've covered everything we wanted to cover this time. I think, we'll try maybe to finish it. We'll see how that goes.
We'll see how that goes. Yeah. I'll do my best. Yeah, I'm looking at my notes. I think we hit the basics. Yep.
Okay. All right, cool. Let's turn then to some email. These were sent to devgameclub@gmail.com. Yeah, why don't you take the first one, sir?
Okay.
We'll try to do a few, see how we go. We're well under an hour.
Yeah, we have I have 3 myself, so maybe we can catch up on some email.
Yep.
Okay, T-Rex on T-Rex from Moss. T-Rex on T-Rex. Hi, Tim and Brett. You guys were talking about the T-Rexes fighting each other, and I just had to see it. I found a 14-year-old video on YouTube, link in the show notes, and it's a doozy. At one point in the fight, one of the T-Rexes actually gets stuck on the other's back. So you get a slow-moving T-Rex carrying another T-Rex around, and then they get stuck on a tree. Inspiring stuff, comrades. Moss. Thanks, Moss, for sending that in. That's a glorious, glorious thing to know. I will definitely watch that.
Well, it reminded me of you describing watching them fight yourself.
Yeah.
I think, right? You had 2 T-Rexes and
they
would kind of get like hung up on the trees and like, oh no, the great enemy, the box.
It's embarrassing. These poor dinosaurs. It was embarrassing. Like, how are you the fiercest predators in the universe?
Happen? I mean, I see how you went extinct, but
yeah. It's like, this guy's trying to get this other one behind this tree and it's just having the roughest time.
Yeah.
But getting stuck to the other one, that's chef's kiss.
Yeah, that's pretty good. All right, here's one from Mystery Dip. It's a holiday one, so we're a few weeks late. The subject is 12 Days of DGC. He says, I'll spare you all the verses and just give the last one. On the 12th day of Dev Game Club, Brett and Tim gave to me 12 emails sent in, 11 games not beaten, 10 books suggested, 9 sections play in, 8 Bat Tim streaming, 7 games get mentioned, 6 reviews of singing, 5 takeaways, 4 show notes, 3 odd Jesus, 2 interviews, and music by Kirk Hamilton. So
nice. Mystery.
12 days of DGC.
Well done. Well done.
So, yes, a belated happy holidays to you in response, sir.
All right.
Get the next one.
Thank you for digging up this relic from Jarko Savula. Hello, devs. I may be one of the few people who got Trespasser back in the day. I loved the interaction with the dinosaurs and how alive they felt. The physics engine was mind-blowing, too. What killed the game for me was the lack of inventory. Can't remember what you said about it in the podcast, but at least at the release, you could only carry one thing. I tried to keep the stuff I found with me by throwing it to the direction I was going. Yeah, you can holster one thing, I think.
That's right, yeah.
The game got tiresome after a while, and I never finished it. However, even after all these years, I remember it fondly because it's one of those few games that seem to make a huge leap into the future. Thank you, Jark. Just didn't land on its feet. Yes, thank you for sending this in. I am supported, and yeah.
Yeah, no, they were definitely taking a giant leap forward, and just the unfortunate thing is the dinosaurs' legs would break when they landed.
The dinosaurs would jump off of the cliff.
They'd jump off the cliff,
fall down a hill.
Yeah, it's it's ambitious thing to try. This is another Trespasser email from Ashton Herman. The subject is another obscure Jurassic Park game. I'm sure there are some of these out there. Hey, Tim and Brett. I had a great time listening to you guys play through Trespasser, which was a game that I had completely forgotten about until your first episode on it. I had to look it up, and it unlocked a memory in my brain of seeing the box in a media play as a kid and being confused about whether or not it was an actual Jurassic Park title or some knockoff. I never did play it, but did enjoy another Jurassic Park game as a kid that I think is also pretty obscure. Jurassic Park for the Sega CD was a point-and-click adventure-style game with, as I remember it, a hard time limit on the game that made me feel almost like an early roguelite. I must have played it dozens of times, always inching closer to actually being able to finish the game, but never quite making it to the helicopter. I can remember the first-person perspective of the game, lending it a feeling of immersion in the Jurassic Park world that the side-scrolling platformers on mainstream consoles didn't, and it felt like the game was chock full of mysteries and secrets to unlock. Honestly, I think it's an underrated gem that I don't believe has ever seen a port or update, and I doubt it has any lasting effect on the industry as a whole, but it sure was fun. Thanks for picking up an obscure title for the last series. That was a great time. Hope you both had a happy holiday season, and thanks for all the very hard work, Ashton Herman.
I did not. Yeah, I've never heard of that. I don't know a lot of the Sega CD games, but that's fascinating to hear. What a weird... A point-and-click adventure with a time limit seems very interesting, but almost like Dragon's Lair or something, where... you're probably not going to finish it on your first go, so you're going to play it multiple times and just memorize and learn what the puzzle solutions are or something. Yeah. Which then turns it into a kind of a rogue. Which, to be honest, Dragon's Lair has a little bit of that going on. But
yeah, it does. Interesting. I think in that sort of a novice player who's just good at reading the screen. You
technically,
you technically could, but I think very common. Let's try to hit one more, and then I think we'll call it there.
Yeah, I have a long one here with more Trespasser. I'm so happy. What was I going to say about Trespasser? It came up. Oh, I was just going to make the point that the Discord's been talking about. Maybe we've talked about this before, and I forgot, but because the last emailer was mentioning, us playing an obscure game. But the other thing that came up that people are debating is us playing more good, bad games, games that didn't, that really, we've talked about this before, right? Where they tried to go, shoot for the moon, but just fell short. But there's something about it because though I know you loved playing Trespasser, there were definitely some interesting conversations and a lot came from it. So there's been so if you're listening and you have a good idea for another Trespasser-like game, to be honest, it's hard. Yeah, we talked about this maybe last episode, but it is hard to think about the sweet spot there of it's not just about playing a bad game, it's about playing a bad game that has good things to talk about, that was trying hard. So yeah. I know we hit that before, but I'm reiterating it. Okay, email.
I would think though, just to say, I don't think there's a lot of those games that are immediatly obvious.
It's hard to think of. Yeah.
So it's a hard one. It was definitely something we could use help on.
The Discord, there's a Discord thread where they do have a list that I think is pretty good, and they're encroaching on some, but it's still very hard to nail down. Mm-hmm. Trespasser, another winner, the perfect example of a game like that. Okay, speaking of Trespasser, subject, Trespasser thoughts. I did not play it, in parentheses. Ryan's Truk. Hello, I have been on a hiatus of listening, but on coming back, I was quickly reminded of how comforting and enjoyable this podcast has always been for me. So thank you. So for that, thank you. You're welcome, Ryan. Thanks for coming back. I have been curious about Trespasser for a while, but have never played it, and I'm a little sad that I missed the chance to play along. Maybe I'll dip in anyways. Seems like a bad idea. That's up to you. Anyways, my actual thoughts on this has less to do with Trespasser and more to do with games like Trespasser. Those games that intrigue us for some reason beyond making fun of a bad game, beyond pointing and laughing, but because you can see something that the folks who worked on it were trying to succeed at. I agree. I think this is actually my favorite kind of game because I end up thinking about them the most. I was really happy that Tim got to have you experience this alongside him. That's true friendship. Yep. I just need to find the next one. Anyways, to add something to something of value to this, my Trespasser, quote unquote. Oh, I can't believe he's bringing this up. This is one of mine too. Oh my gosh. Oh, I love it. Okay, my quote unquote Trespasser is Call of Cthulhu Dark Corners of the Earth. That is a great example, Ryan, because it's one of mine too. I forgot all about that game, and that is a hidden bad gem, weird game. Yeah. H.P. Lovecraft aside.
I also played it. Yeah.
Yeah, I replay the first portion of the game probably once a year. Interesting. It's like a first-person point-and-click adventure with a lot of mood setting and interesting little bits that I think about all the time. There's some fun little moments of wandering around, being a detective, slowly learning of the horrors going on, and something interesting, even while fighting against controls. Chase scenes that I still think are overall fantastic. But it's also painful to play and riddled with bugs. I specifically remember a bug toward the end of the game that can come up, like literally the end, where it auto-saves you, and if you're just out of a position, you will die from a falling rock like 90% of the time. You can either go back to an earlier save, which is quite a ways back, and hope it doesn't happen again, or do as you did and keep reloading and smashing buttons, because sometimes that stops you from dying. But it is still a game that I think about all of the time. All right. That was longer than intended, so I'll end on one last thank you for putting on this wonderful podcast. It is both my comfort food and a font of inspiration for my dabbling in design. Thank you so much. Happy New Year, Ryan Truk. Thank you, Ryan. That is a great call. You've played that as well.
I have, yeah.
I have often spoken fondly of that game. Another colleague of ours, Reed, we've talked about it before. I think the other thing about that game, because it's very much a game of that era where it's held together with bubble gum and tape.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like Trespasser, I do agree with Ryan that they were trying to do way more than they should have, because there's a lot of I would sort of say there's a lot of different varying types of experiences in that game, in one game, because there is like detective stuff, there's action sequences, there's huge set pieces, there's traditional puzzles, there's a lot of, and it's a shooter as well, and there's horror elements. It's the old days where, as Brett would say, the designers have too much control with the scripting, and they're just scripting their way through that game, trying to do like, well, what if we did this? I actually know a couple of people who worked on that game, so that's a funny one. H.P. Lovecraft issues aside, but yeah. So
another couple I think of, one is Shenmue. I think is
yeah.
We played that one, and the other is Deadly Premonition.
That came up in Discord.
Yeah,
and I mentioned that's one that you've been mentioning for our Halloween cast. So
yeah,
maybe we'll do that next. But the funny thing, you mentioned Shenmue. I think about Shenmue all the time since we played it, more than I should
right now.
Yeah, it is. I can see why it has a cult following, because it is so. It's so weird, but there's something about it for sure. And I'm not even joking about the forklift stuff, like separate from the forklift nonsense. I'm just, the game overall is so interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks for sending those in again to devgameclub@gmail.com. We also love to get reviews. Haven't had one in a minute, but we'll get those if they go to Apple. If somewhere else, then drop us a line. Let us know where to look. We love to read them sometimes on the air. You can find us on the web at devgameclub.com, on Twitter at devgameclub, in theory, or Tim is sometimes twitching at twitch.tv/
Tim Longo Jr. with the JR at the end. And also, I just created an Instagram account and a Threads account.
Nice.
Much to Brett's chagrin. And so even though he will not be maintaining them, I will try to do a little bit of that. So it's just at Dev Game Club on those two apps. So please follow us there. I wanted to do it to hopefully do a little bit of promoting for the thing this weekend, but anyway.
Cool. All right. Well, we also have a Discord, who are sort of behind all that organization from the top of the episode. Our intro and outro music was written and performed by Kirk Hamilton, commissioned by friend of the cast, Aaron Evers, and our logo is by Mark Garcia. Have fun waiting for your slowest ships to retire this week, and good night.
Good night.